Okay. Hi guys. I organized a bit of a treat for you guys. I've been talking to Luiza over the past couple of days, and I thought it would be fun if I could get a proper language teacher to come in and just talk to you guys for a bit, because everyone's been doing live streams, just talking about various things, and I thought, well, the perfect thing for this page would be do you have an actual language teacher come here and talk to you guys about some fun things? So I'm going to turn it over to Luisa, who teaches Italian.
Ciao a tutti, I'm Luisa and I teach Italian and Japanese online. So this is very familiar for me. This is a format I know very well. And I am originally from Venice, so I'm from the north of Italy, and I teach in the States. I'm in Virginia right now, so hopefully I will be able to cheer all of you up a little bit and keep you entertained during the quarantine. Um, we were talking with Steve before about what I could do that could be interesting for you guys, and I think what we could talk about today would be the pronunciation of the Italian language, and we could talk about the most common Italian words that people know around the world, how to pronounce them, how um, to show off a little bit, maybe when you pronounce these words correctly, and then we can talk about dialects a little bit. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and Steve should help me out interpret them for you. So the first thing we're going to start off with is how to pronounce Italian vowels. So I'm going to be starting off by writing in the chat here on Google Hangouts. But Steve, do I have to share my screen for that?
No. I can do that for you. There we go.
All right, perfect. So we're going to start off by talking about the 5 vowels of Italian, which are these 5: A, E, I, O, U. And for those of you who are mother tongue English speakers, you know that sometimes a Y is considered a vowel in English, but not in Italian, for a very simple reason. We do not have the letter Y at all in our language. Italian is a Romance language, as most of you, I'm sure, will have heard about, and so it's very closely related to Spanish, French, Romanian, Portuguese, and a few others. And these vowels are pronounced in a very similar way to Spanish. So let's try and see how to pronounce them. For every vowel, I'm going to give you an example word or more, so we can play around words you already know, hopefully. So let's start with the word a, and I can give you the word pizza, pizza. And the good thing you might notice is that vowels are always pronounced almost the same way in Italian, which is great. It's a little bit different from English, where you have, all your I before E kind of rules. And so it's a much more predictable language from that point of view. And so any other word I can give you that contains letter A will be pronounced exactly in the same way. For example, A as in giallo, A as in alba, and many others. The second vowel is letter E, which is pronounced E. So the sound as in the word penne, penne, the type of pasta. And the pronunciation of this one will change a little bit. We have what we call a closed E and an open E. And there are official rules of how to go with these two, and which words should include a closed E and which words should include an open E. But To be honest, we have a lot of differences in our regional pronunciations and dialects. So usually when I start off teaching my new students this, I don't even bother going into that, because it will definitely depend on who you're talking to. So in general, you can remember the sound like in penne. And in English, we have this sound connected to letter E a lot when letter E comes at the beginning of a word. So we have words like egg or excellent, eh. Then we have letter I, which is always pronounced as E, E. And I'm going to use the word pizza again to give you an example. Pizza, E. And other words that you might know that contain this letter are the brand Armani, Armani, or let me see. I'm sure some of you have been to Starbucks at least once, so this is another word. Venti, venti, which means 20. And they use it in Starbucks, I believe, because the drinks are 20 ounces, like the biggest drinks they have. Steve, have anything to? No? All good?
No, no.
And then we have.
I'm just changing this the bandwidth just to make it a bit smoother. There we go.
All right. Then we have letter O. Letter O sounds like this. O. O. Think of the English letter O as a combination of two sounds. You go up, O, and then you go down. O. O. The Italian letter goes up, but never goes back down. O. O. For this letter, we can use the word, let me think, vino, vino, wine. Or what else might you know in Italian that contains this letter? If any of you have suggestions, I'm happy to pronounce them for you. Oh, we have the word opera, opera.
Okay, I've just been reading the chat. We got a message here from Roxani. Ciao.
Ciao.
No.
So the word ciao, cha, ciao, ciao. So what you want to avoid?
Oh yes, and in Italian you got different spelling rules to English. So the CI is a ch, whereas CH in English is a ch, and CH in Italian is a k. So it's actually pistachio and not pistachio.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, the two, I would say, most difficult letters to learn in Italian from the point of view of an English speaker are letter C and letter G, probably. I'm going to finish with the vowels for a second, and then we can go straight to that.
Okay.
So the only vowel we are missing is letter U. U sounds like oo, oo. So again, think of the English letter as something that goes up and down. U, EU. And the Italian vowel only has one of the two sounds, only the oo part. Ooh. Okay, we can go to the C and G. So yes, as you mentioned, C and G can be a little bit challenging for those who speak English. Letter C can be pronounced in two ways in Italian. C can be followed by an I or an E. In this case, if it's followed by an I or if it's followed by an E, it will sound like the ch sound that we normally hear in English with the letter H. So CI in Italian is chi, chi. Think of the E sound in pizza, chi. And then CE is going to be che, che. Think of the e sound in penne or egg, che. And the same thing happens for letter G. So these special pronunciations only come up when C and G are followed by I or E. So what happens in any other case, you might ask? In any other case, when letter C is followed by anything that's not letter I or letter E, then it will sound like letter K, like the K in car. So, for example, if we have CH, let me see what word we can use for this example.
I was just thinking about something. There's some interesting things that people get confused with. Some people would pronounce it as ciabatta, but actually
Oh, very good.
the ci just means a ch, so it's actually pronounced ciabatta. Is that right?
Yes, there's actually 3 diphthongs that we need to pay attention to. We have CIA, CIO, and CIU. So these 3 combinations of letters are called diphthongs, which means that we are fusing 2 vowels together, and they will sound as cha, cho, chu, like in ciao, ciabatta. And the reason why we do this is because we have no other way to spell the sound cha, cha. Because the sound ch only comes out if C is followed by an I. So basically here we are using letter I as a little trick, a little device to pronounce this ch sound. When it comes to C followed by anything else, anything that's not an I or an E, it will become a k sound. So if I forgot about the I in there and I wrote CACOCU like this, it would sound as ka, ko, ku. So the only way to pronounce ch is going to be put an I in there. So yeah, we have words like ciao, ciabatta, Versace. I love this word because the final sound is e, and I've heard many English speakers pronouncing it as what I would identify as an I in Italian.
Versace.
Exactly. So this is gonna be Versace, like egg, excellent, Versace. Other words that we have like that is, if anybody's ever seen the Fellini movie, The Sweet Life, dolce vita, that's why, dolce vita. So basically the elephant in the room is that in Italian you can pronounce letter C as a ch, you can pronounce it as a k, k, but you can never pronounce it as an S. And that's actually good news, because if you're trying to spell out something in Italian and you hear an S sound, be sure that that's an S. It's never going to be a C. That's actually very good news for the learner.
The S comes from French, and so Italian doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And so this was one that tricked me as well, but because an English speaker might pronounce that as pistachio or pistachio.
So what happens with letter H? Well, it kind of falls under the rule that letter C only becomes a ch sound when it's followed by an I or an E. In this case, it's an H, so it's not an I, it's not an E. We're going to pronounce it as a K. I have to correct your spelling a little bit. I'm really sorry.
Two C's. Okay, my apologies.
Sorry, I've been told that, but yeah. So pista. It's not an I, it's not an E, so it's not a ch sound. Pistachio.
Yes.
Pistachio. It's different, right?
Yes.
Another one, and this I hear in the US all the time, okay? This word, I'm going to blow your mind. Your mind, I guess. I'm going to give you 3 seconds to figure out how to pronounce this. Think about it. It's not a ch sound. It's not, because we don't have an I or an E following the C directly. 1, 2, 3. This is bruschetta. K sound. Bruschetta.
Yes, because I think in German SCH is a sh sound, and in English S and some other letter and H, people just assume that SH is a sh, so they will say bruschetta.
Yeah, I've heard bruschetta, and this is I have a suggestion for my American friends, American viewers here. When you pronounce a letter T in Italian, don't make it a D. It's not bruschetta with a D
Bruschetta.
sound. Yeah, bruschetta. Ta. Be British. Ta with this one. And that's actually one of the things that Italian mother tongues are confused about. But when it comes to Italian spoken by learners, is the fact that we do not recognize T and D as two similar sounds. So if we hear something like spaghetti with a D, spaghetti, it will take us a second, more than a second, to figure that out. So it's going to be spaghetti. Spaghetti.
What this is actually a common word, but I see it's got a GH, so that would tell you that it's a G and not a J.
Exactly. So going to the G sound, there's a reason why I said it's not just letter C, but it's also letter G that's kind of difficult for English speakers to pronounce.
So if you wanted J, you would get gelato.
That's right. So why is that? Why does letter G sound like a J so often in Italian? The answer is very simple. We do not have letter J. Not only we don't have letter Y, but we also don't have letter J. So this is the only way we have to create a J sound. So when does a G sound like a J? When it's followed by an I or an E. So the rule is the same as letter C. G plus I and G plus E sounds like a J. So I'm gonna have the word you gave me was gelato. Gelato. The rule with diphthongs that we talked about before with letter C, with the word ciabatta, which is not ciabatta, or the word ciao that is not ciao, but ciao, well, that applies to letter G too. So if I write these sounds, I'm going to fuse the two vowels and pronounce them as ja, jo, ju.
So I think there's a common Italian name, Giancarlo.
Giancarlo, perfetto, Giancarlo. Giancarlo. Or I hear here in America, you will have to confirm if this happens in other countries too, but I hear people pronouncing this word. I'm gonna give everybody 3 seconds to think about it. 1, 2, 3. This is the word for cheese, formaggio. Yeah. Not Gio, formaggio. So, and another common misunderstanding I feel is because people feel that Italian is so closely related to French, they assume that we have the j sound. But we actually don't. The only options you have with letter G are either a g sound, like the word great, or a J sound, like the word jet, or geography in English. So if I give you the name of a very famous cheese, such as this, the name is going to be Parmigiano, J, like a J, Parmigiano, Parmigiano, not Parmesan, which doesn't sound bad, but it sounds very, fancy and French to me, not Italian though. So that's something I hear a lot, actually. I think it's really cute. I love it. But unfortunately, we don't have the sound in Italian.
And it's also
So,
not Parmigiano.
esatto, exactly. Giano. So yeah, the hardest sounds, what people consider to be the hardest sounds to remember in Italian are CIA, CIO, CIU, which are the diphthongs for letter C, cha, cho, chu, and then the diphthongs for letter G, ja, jo, ju. What about famous words with these combinations? Let me see.
Can I throw in a thing here quickly? There is one word that I found difficult. It's this word.
Ooh, that one's a hard one. Okay, so you're gonna have to help me out with your language knowledge, like your very broad language knowledge here, because the only other language that I know of that has this sound is Portuguese. So, and in Portuguese, if I don't go wrong, they spell it with an H after the L, like this. So this sounds like yeah, yeah. So if you guys want, I can give you a very quick tutorial of how to create this sound, okay? So in most languages, we have one type of L, which is a sound that you create by placing the tip of your tongue just behind your upper teeth. So let me see. Let's pretend that this is the top of my mouth, and these are my teeth, and this is my tongue. And I just have to go and lightly touch behind my teeth here and produce L, L, L. Then we have a dark L, known as an American L, that I have to work with a lot at work, which is basically you do the same thing. You touch behind your teeth with the tip of your tongue, but you go to the side of your mouth. So instead of L, L, you get L, L. And you can hear this in sounds like the word lake. I pronounce it with the Italian L, lake, lake. But in America, you would hear lake, lake. Now this one, yi, this sound is it's it's almost like how can I put it? It's not all black and white. It's a spectrum. Okay, we have an L, we have a dark L, and then if we go deep enough, we find this sound. So how to create it in your mouth? Instead of lightly touch behind the teeth with just the tip of your tongue, you have to use almost all of your tongue and stick it to the palate, stick it to the top of your mouth, and slide towards your teeth. And you create.
Can I give it a try?
Yes, please.
Li.
Yeah, exactly. Li. Li.
So,
So it starts.
so it's almost like your tongue is lazy and just sliding across.
Li. Mhm. Yeah, I usually use the dark L to guide American students towards this sound. Um, and yeah, that's how it is. Yi, yi, yi. It's interesting to know that there are parts of Italy where this sound is not originally part of their dialect, and they are not really accustomed to this sound, and they simply don't use it, or they use a very light version of it. An example of this is Sicily. For example, the word for a sweater, a jumper, it's gonna be in standard Italian, maglione, maglione. Yeah, yeah. But in a certain, with a certain accent, with a certain regional accent, like Sicilian, this could become maglione, with a Y sound almost. Maglione, maglione. And this actually happens in my dialect too, in Venetian dialect. But I would say the younger generation in Veneto, in my region, um, there are a lot of young Venetians that don't speak a lot of dialect. And it would be interesting to ask somebody from Sicily if they feel like this is the case in Sicily too, that this is not something that happens anymore to younger people. Um, Another sound that I would say is very interesting, how it develops and how it's different in the various regions, is the sound for R, letter R, because I get a lot of new students who tell me that they they are worried that they will not be able to roll their R's. And my answer is always, there are many, many parts of Italy where people do not roll their R's, and we understand them perfectly. So you don't have to worry about rolling your R's, especially at the beginning. Um, we don't have any sounds in Italian that are so close to an R to risk misunderstandings. So you can use your English R, you can use your British R, your American R, you can use a Japanese R, and you will still be understood in Italy.
So what are some of the different R's that are used in Italy?
For example, there's a teeny tiny region on the top, on the northwest of Italy that is on the border with France, and the name of the region is Val d'Aosta. And in Val d'Aosta, a lot of people pronounce the R in a very similar way to the French R. Uh-huh, uh-huh. I am bad at that. I'm very bad. So another example would be there's an area, relatively small area near Venice and in Venice itself, where they use the what we would consider the American R, like this. And there are a lot of jokes about this area, about the fact that they use this R. And the name of the town where they use this the most is, in standard Italian, Marghera, 2 R's, Marghera. And they don't pronounce it like this. They say Marghera, Marghera. So, well, it is not what we consider to be the national standard for pronunciation, but we can perfectly understand everything they say. So that's definitely not something I would worry about if I was a beginner student of Italian. There are other things we can work on a little bit more, but rolled R's are definitely not the first thing I would tackle. No.
So,
Let me
so,
see.
so, what do you think are the most important things to tackle for a beginner at Italian?
The two things we just mentioned at the beginning of this call, vowels and the two letters G and C.
Yeah.
I feel like those two are the first things you want to get down, and all the rest is going to come with time. The last thing you want to tackle, something that is you need to be able to speak fluently, but is definitely not something I would consider the appropriate for a real beginner level student, is how to pronounce double consonants. So, for example, the word spaghetti has a double T. Or, let me think. I'm going to write two words. One of them has a double consonant and one doesn't. The first word means bowl. The second word means shovel. Spanish has a very specific way of pronouncing double L's. We do not in Italian, but we pronounce the L sound for longer. So the first word is palla. The second word is pala. There are many tricks as to how to be able to learn how to pronounce these double consonants, and these ways, these tricks, these methods are divided into two big categories. Letters that you can actually hold for longer sound wise, and letters that you cannot hold for a longer time. For example, I can say letter L and I can keep pronouncing it for like 1 minute if I want to. L, or letter M, letter N, N. So for these letters, it's easier. If there's a double letter, you just pronounce it, you hold it for a little bit longer. But then there are a lot of letters where you cannot do this. For example, letter T or letter D or letter C, for example. Try to pronounce letter T
For
for longer.
instance, in Italian, dottore. Is that correct?
Dottore. That's right. That's good. This is the word for doctor. And see, we wrote it at the same
Yes,
time.
I
So
read it
yeah.
already.
So how would you pronounce a double consonant here? There are different tricks, different ways to teach this. What I like to explain is that you have to pronounce. You have to imagine that you are dividing the word into syllables. And when it comes to a double consonant, you want to split the syllables in the middle of the double consonant, like so. And if you try to pronounce it like this, keeping in mind the division in syllables, it will end up being dottore. And that would be the sound you want to reach. Now, why is that? What kind of sound are we trying to reach? Basically, we want to create a little pause, a little non-sound, a little emptiness before actually pronouncing the sound T. Dottore, dottore. Little break, little pause. The only other language I personally know that has this is Japanese. In Japanese, they use a very specific little symbol that literally symbolizes this little break, this little pause. So if I wanted to spell the word dottore in Japanese, it would look like this. If my keyboard allows me. You see the second symbol in there, this very small symbol?
Yes, yes.
It represents this pause.
Yes.
Dottore. I'm sure there are many other languages that have this. I just happen to not know any of them. So if you guys have any suggestions,
Yes,
I would be very curious, actually.
I think they're called Gemini.
See.
It's quite interesting because in English we got the word doctor, and I think what happened in Italian, they dropped the C and then the T just got longer. So you also have amministratore or something like that.
What is it? Again?
An administrator.
This guy?
Yes, amministratore.
There are certain combinations of letters that you will never find in Italian that you can use in English to achieve a very similar sound to a double consonant. For example, this is not the best example, but when you put a T in front of a CH in English, you achieve that little pause that we use in double consonants in Italian. So, et tu, you create a pause, right?
Yes.
And in Italian, this is how we spell et tu.
Oh, okay.
Et tu. Same sound, same pause. Et tu. Administrator. So that's a good example of the combination DM that we don't have in Italian.
Yes.
Another one that I hear a lot that we don't really have. Don't quote me on this. Probably we will have a couple words that have this combination of sounds, but in words like construction, NS, in Italian, the N disappears. Costruzione.
uh, and and
Or
and a director becomes direttore.
sì, director, direttore. Yes, and the CT
Yes,
also
the
disappears.
CT
Like
becomes a double
doctor.
T. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. How do you pronounce director?
What in my
In
uh,
English, yeah.
yes, we would say director.
So you do pronounce the C, do you?
Yes, yes, director. Um, I
And
think I think
I mean,
what makes English very different to Italian is English. The technical name for the weak vowels. So what English has very complicated rules about how you pronounce things in different places. Whereas in Italian, like wherever it is, that's how fotografia, you know, gelato. Whereas in English, like decide becomes decision, and there's all these complicated rules about how to pronounce things, and like
a
and
very
it's not a
interesting rule about.
and it's not a director, it's a director.
I got you. Yeah,
So it
the
becomes
I
a
sound.
yeah. So it
Yeah,
becomes a schwa.
yeah. It's out of all the difficult rules for vowels that I've learned in English, or I should say I studied. I don't know if I've learned them, but that I studied. There's the difference between long vowels and short vowels, which I think is the hardest concept to learn for Italian speakers. Um, for example, a difference between pronouncing these two words. Well, in Italian, there, if I don't know if the fault is in the type of explanation that we get when we study English.
Yes.
I don't know if it's something that you need to get trained to do for a long time, but uh, I've never heard the idea of long vowels and short vowels being used when teaching English to foreigners. I've
So, so,
always
so
the English was
how is
being
that
taught
generally
to.
explained to Italians learning English?
It's not explained, which is why it becomes so hard for us. It's something,
Uh,
and I'm talking. Not, this is not my professional opinion. This is more of my experience with English learning in Italy.
yes,
It's this is one of the concepts that is oftentimes kind of skipped or missed or is missing in
yes,
English courses for Italians. And but what I wanted to get to is that in Italian we do not have this concept. We do not
yes.
have the concept of long
What
and short
what
vowels. So
that's part of the thing that got me really interested in language. It is some of the things we have in common, and there's some of the things that are very different. Like in English, a very something that native speakers just do like instinctively is a whole strong vowels and weak vowels. So we know automatically that it's photography and not photography. And so what often happens is that if you come from a language that doesn't do this, you would end up speaking with all the vowels are strong. So I read a book, I take a photograph, and that's not how an English speaker would say it.
this is actually very interesting because I feel like the terminology that is used to teach English to mother tongue speakers and English being taught to Italians is very different because, for example, in Italian we do not talk at all about strong and weak vowels.
Yes,
We don't have that concept at all. I
yes.
just figured out what you mean by that, but we talk about main stress.
Oh, okay.
That's the main word that is used in Italy. Well, we don't say it like that. We say accento, but we
Accento.
mean main stress.
Yes, yes.
Exactly, accento.
And another language that does this strong and weak vowels is Russian. Um,
Oh,
so so um, So for instance, you don't have a comment, even though comment is spelled something like that. Um, it's not comentar, it's comment, but because the first syllable doesn't have stress, so the o becomes an a.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Actually,
number one is written
Adin.
Odin, but it's pronounced Adi.
I only took a course, I think 3 months of Russian, and the word that confused me the most was the word отлично, because we heard it, we kept hearing that word from the teacher for I think a month, and then finally she taught us how to write it, and we learned that отлично is actually written with an O.
Yes, yes.
Because it's not.
Yeah. I think what really got me into language. So I was a full-time programmer and I worked with systems all day. And then I came to languages and I was like, well, why don't people explain this? If people understood how it works, then maybe they can understand it a bit better. And I created some of my own lessons for Northern Sami, which had just got it's a language spoken by the Sami people in north of Norway and the north of Finland. It's a tiny language, got about 25,000 speakers, but it's got its own thing, and it's also got those double letters. So we have Yela and Yella. Yella is a language. So it also has
That's
a
so
double letter.
interesting. It's so similar to Italian.
Yeah.
So similar.
So
Ghella.
yes.
Okay.
So languages do similar things and different things all over the place. Um, but what really got me into them is I thought there really is a space here to teach things in a different way. But because in English, sheep and ship are two completely different words, and they're perceived as different words. But it's funny. It's funny when you learn another language that has all these funny distinctions, like Hindi has these things called aspirated sounds. So you have a pa and a pa. Those two completely different sounds, but they're not perceived as different to
So
English
it's.
speakers.
I think. I think I'm guessing it's the same concept they have in Korean. You have pa and you have pa.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong because I didn't study as much as I should have with Korean, but maybe somebody can join in and help us with this.
Yes. So,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
so
there are so many different little things.
yes. So what really got me interested in it is kind of exposing the underlying structure, because that is something that I learned a lot when I was a programmer, and looking at the structure of things. And I thought I could bring some of that to the language world, because I think there's definitely a place for it.
What what was the first way you started learning about languages? What was the method you used? Was it in university?
Well,
Was it on your.
totally just on my own. But I just started reading on Wikipedia and listening to talks and things like that. And then I started seeing all these systems, and then I started reading about weak vowels, strong and weak vowels, and they have another term that they use, syllable timed languages versus stress timed languages. So Italian is what's called a syllable time language. So if you pronounce Italian fast or slowly, it still sounds the same. So you
Yes,
so
absolutely.
so, so, so one
For
so one
example,
example that they gave was molto intelligenti studenti vanno amabili.
I will give you an example of what we mean by main stress, because it is true that you can pronounce things for longer and that will not affect the meaning. But stressing vowels is also important, and that will compromise communication sometimes. For example, these two words, I know they're spelled the same, I know, but one is ancora. I'm putting the main stress on the O. Ancora.
Yeah.
And it doesn't depend on the length. Ancora could be the same if it was short. The other word is ancora. Ancora.
Yes.
So how would you call this in your, would you still talk about strong and weak vowels, or would you talk about main stress?
Vowels and stress are two different things. So the strong and the weak vowel is a process whereby the vowel of the it's a pronunciation thing. So in photography,
Yes, so the
the
pronunciation is
the
actually
the
affected,
fo
right?
becomes a f. Whereas here it's not the pronunciation that's changing; it's the stress, which is how much effort you put into when you say ancora.
Ancora. Yeah. Yeah, it's not about, there's no difference in the sound you're
Yeah.
producing. There's no
So
difference in the
so
pronunciation, no.
you came into Italian learning from and
Well,
just straightforward as a teacher, not like through linguistics or anything.
what happened is that I was not originally planning on teaching my own language. It was something that I discovered later on after I got my university degree. So what I did was I started learning Japanese when I was 21 years old. I fell in love with the language. I went to university to study it. I took a bachelor's degree. I started studying on a bachelor's curriculum for Japanese, and I won a scholarship that allowed me to move to Japan.
Oh,
And while studying Japanese, while living in Japan, I realized that my interest was not Japanese specifically, but I really wanted to work with languages, plural, and
yes. Oh, okay.
I feel like for the most part, people don't. It's a cliche, but it's true that you don't really appreciate the things you have until you don't have them anymore.
Oh,
And for me,
absolutely.
that was particularly true for Italian and for my culture and for my language. I needed to get out of Italy to actually appreciate it. So
Yes.
once I moved to Japan, I started realizing how beautiful my language was, how interesting it was, and I realized that it would make me happier to teach languages rather than just learning them and keeping them for
Oh, okay.
myself.
Yes, yes,
And I decided to get a master's degree in Italian teaching.
yes.
And I finished my master's degree last year. I'm currently writing my final thesis because it took a while. It's like the courses were done more than a year ago, but they give us more time for the thesis, basically.
Yes.
Um, I professional training, I guess, because I studied in university for both of the languages that I now teach. Um, but I didn't. I never took linguistic courses. I took one when I was in Japan, and that was interesting
Yes.
because taking a linguistics course in English when your English is not that great to begin with
Oh,
is quite an adventure. It was an
yes.
adventure for me, for sure. But I fell in love with it, and I'm learning more every day. And I feel like learning linguistics is a very good way to approach languages.
Yes,
It gives you a very solid
because
foundation.
it's kind of a structured way of looking at, but because you could look at any of these things and kind of make up terms, and you could say, well, English has got you could say something like Italian's got a j sound and a g sound, and the one is a gooey
Yeah.
sound and the other is a pooey sound or whatever. You could make up your own terms about it. But
I
if you look at it from a linguistic point of view, you can say, okay, well, you got strong vowels over here, you got weak vowels, you got dominants, and you can look at it in a very structured way, and that really kind of make your life a lot easier. Because the interesting thing about English is that fluent English has a certain rhythm to it. So English speakers don't speak like this. We speak in this kind of up down way. Because if if an English, I'm pronouncing each syllable with the same time. So if each syllable had the same time, it sounds weird.
It
Um,
would be a little bit.
Yeah, so
It's
what English does is it smushes all the different syllables into different packets. And that's why the vowels get shortened because the syllables that don't have stress kind of aren't as important. And so the vowels kind of get smushed around. So it's not we end up not saying it photography because the first part isn't that important. So over time, what happened is that people just smushed that sound and then the sound changed. Whereas in Italian, that never happened because each syllable is given its own weight. And so you don't have that weird up
it's
and
funny because
down.
I'm thinking of what my students often tell me when they're first starting off with their lessons is something that I get almost like um, a complaint that they have is, guys, you really have to pronounce everything. Why do you have to pronounce everything? You guys really couldn't you just it's if you drop one or two letters, that's just, and it's really it's hilarious to me. I love when I get that because it's like, yes, you have to pronounce every single letter. I'm so sorry. Not true. We have a couple diphthongs. You can get away with skipping the I sometimes, but
Yes.
or we don't pronounce the H oftentimes. But for the rest, yes, I'm gonna have to ask you to pronounce every single little tiny thing, and that's where I struggle with English. And
Yes.
one thing I've always wondered is how but this is not rhetoric, this is a real question I have. How can people teach a language without speaking other languages?
Yes.
That's something that I've always struggled with, and that was, I think it was what brought me to the idea of, yes, I really want to teach. Was when I was in Japan, I was studying in university, and
Yes.
all of my Japanese teachers in university, the ones who were teaching me Japanese, they couldn't speak a word of other languages,
Yes.
a word. And
That's why it's so useful knowing other languages because you can connect Italian to Northern Sami, you can connect Italian to Japanese, you can connect any language almost any other language because there's so much similarities and differences between languages all around the world.
you were talking about the importance of of studying linguistics before, and I feel like, so there are a lot of polyglots in the world who don't realize that by learning multiple languages and using their previous experience to learn a new language faster, that's pretty much like they were studying linguistics. They're just not aware of it.
Yes,
They're
yes,
learning the rules that dominate language in general. They just never probably learned them officially. They never officially took a linguistics course, so they're not really aware.
this is why I was kind of so bad at languages before. And because they say we learned Afrikaans in school, and hey, het dit geëet. They'll teach us these sentences, and it doesn't sink in because it doesn't make any sense to your brain. But then if you start sitting down and actually stepping through it in a kind of a systematic way, well, that's the way my brain works. So that worked a lot better.
There are,
And now in hindsight, I
yeah.
realize how similar English is to Afrikaans. Um,
I feel like there are a lot of people with different kind of mentalities, kind of approaches when it
yes,
comes to this because uh, I am really similar to you. I like to know the rules.
yes,
I like to know. I like to have sort of a basis, not basic knowledge of the structure that I'm going to be implementing in a new
yes,
language, both like phonetics wise and like grammar wise. But I've also met a lot of other um, a lot of students and a lot of polyglots that go in the opposite, like they in the opposite direction, literally, and they just they actually believe that starting off by learning the structure prevents you from being genuine and intuitive in your learning. So I feel like there's so many different opinions out there when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I
I think a little bit of everything is good. But the funny thing about language is that it has a lot of structure, but that structure came about naturally. Like the thing that Italian and English and German do that kind of just came about. Like no one woke up one day and says, "I'm going to replace the C with a double T." You know, it just happened.
Do you want to start quoting Chomsky now? Are we ready to start quoting stuff? Yeah, no, I only started learning I only started like formally learning about this less than 2 years ago with my master's degree, and it blew my mind
Yeah.
that there are already so many theories out there of how language came to be and how our brain kind of uh, analyzes language. It's mine. I don't think this is one of those subjects where you can stop learning. You can go all of
No.
your life.
Yeah.
Like,
It just keeps going. Yeah. I think we've veered wildly away from talking about Italian. Now we're just in the weeds of linguistics. But I think that's perfect for this page. Um, and this particular podcast. How much time do you have left?
I actually have to go in about 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Why don't we just finish it off with some fun language thing? Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the different dialects and how they are similar and how they're different to like standard
Could
Italian.
you repeat that? I didn't catch what's
That
different about what?
if you can just give us an overview of a couple of the dialects in Italian
Oh, the dialects.
and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
some of
sure.
them are similar and how they're different.
Sure. So I think I'm going to be using a map for this. Let me share my screen for a second.
Okay.
Um, so this map is taken from a website. I'm trying to zoom in. It was made by a certain Antonio Cicolella. I'm reading from the source of the map, and let me see if I can. Okay, allow. You should be able to see this map, I hope.
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. So this is a map that shows all the very specific different dialects of Italy, and they are divided into macro areas divided by color, basically. In the north, we see all the green-ish dialects. This would
Yes.
be the basically this would be what I belong to in terms of language.
Okay.
Um, if we zoom in a little bit, we can see that the main greens here on the right are the Venetian languages.
Okay.
The ones here.
Where's Venice here exactly?
Sorry?
Well, where is Venice in this picture exactly?
Venice is right here. Can you see where I'm pointing?
No, I can't see here.
Let me try to open. Oh, there we are. In Paint.
Yes.
Possible. Okay. So this is Venice
Oh,
here.
okay.
And just give you another couple references. Milan is, I want to say, about here.
Yes.
And Turin is about here.
Okay.
And Bologna. Just to give you the
So
main cities.
are all the green colors relatively similar to each other?
They are, I want to say, relatively similar, but mostly relatively intelligible to
Oh,
each
okay.
other,
Yes.
mutually intelligible. So I'm from here, I'm from Venice. If somebody from this area, the west side, the region of Piemonte, was to try and speak in their dialect to me, I would probably be able to guess around 70% of what
okay.
they're saying. The pink areas up here indicate not dialects, but foreign languages spoken in Italy. For example, here in bright pink, we have German.
Oh, okay.
Because we have a part of Italy where they speak German as their first language. And this area was annexed with the Second World War, so it's relatively, it's Italy only, it has been Italy not for that long,
Oh,
basically.
okay. And what are some of the features of the Venetian dialect that kind of sets it apart from
From the point of view of a learner who wants to be able to identify speakers of a certain area, I would say what stands out the most about Venice is the fact that our words do not end with a vowel,
oh, really?
which is something that happens in literally every single word in Italian. So, for example, let me think. Very silly example. Mano means well, it means hand in Italian,
Yeah.
and in Venetian it's man.
Man. Oh, that's very interesting.
Very simple example. Or it's difficult for me to use just one dialect to represent the whole of my region because they are really different from each other.
No, sure.
My dialect is a mix of my personal dialect is a mix of the Treviso area here,
Yes.
and the Venetian area here, and
Okay.
the Basso Piave area here. So somebody who comes from here could tell me, "Oh no, you used the wrong word for this." So it's very, very localized. It gets very specific.
Oh, okay.
So the word for spoon in Italian is cucchiaio, cucchiaio, and the word in Venetian is it depends on who you ask. Scuier or sculier or cucciaro, sometimes you can hear.
Oh, okay.
So the predominant feature is the fact that the words do not end with a vowel, basically.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
When it comes to how different these dialects are, we also have to keep into account that Italy was actually officially founded only in the second half of the 1800s.
Yes, yes.
So this is a very new country we're talking about.
Yeah, so it's almost like Venice and Rome and Venice and Naples were almost in different countries.
They were officially different countries, yeah. And Venice was the Venetian region was one of the last regions to be annexed. And even today you can hear a lot of people in Venice being sort of like hardcore separationists.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and when it comes to the difference in terms of language, if you had me listen to a native speaker of one of the blue dialects down here, for example, let me use paint again. For example, a Naples area dialect from this area, I would literally not be able to translate even just 20%.
Oh,
it would
wow.
be very difficult for me. Yes. And I'm saying this because I've not been exposed to these dialects. Yes. Obviously, I would guess it would be easier for a Venetian who's been living in Naples to understand it.
And I hear standard Italian is based mostly on the Tuscan dialect.
Yes, that's correct. The Tuscan dialect, when we think of Tuscany, we have to think of the red region here in the center, in the heart of Italy, basically. Yes. Something that I've seen a lot of students of Italian struggling with is the idea that since modern Italian was developed from the Tuscan language, that means that the nowadays, the Tuscan language we have nowadays is exactly the same as Standard Italian. That's unfortunately not true, because Italian was basically selected to be our national language over 100 years ago,
Yes.
and they kept regulating it. And they obviously, the moment they decided that that would be our national language, they decided to start printing textbooks and materials and like in Italian. And what that resulted in was the development of the language was basically halted.
Yes.
Whereas Tuscan as a dialect kept developing at full speed in the
Yes.
meantime. And so modern Tuscan dialect is very different from standard Italian.
Yes.
So if you were to go to, yeah.
It's funny, but because in linguistics we have this thing called IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet, and you can write out sounds very specifically in there. So I took something that a South African would understand, and I wrote that out in IPA, and no one could figure out what it meant. So even though like I think it was something like, what did you say? I put it there. And South African would perfectly understand it. But when you actually write it out, because we're in South Africa, the H at the beginning of words, like here, the H often becomes a year. So
Yeah.
here will become year, and then what happens is that we don't pronounce the R's. So we don't say car, we say car.
With Italian dialects, it gets a little bit harder because we have to go back and think of what a dialect is. A
Yes.
lot of people argue that Italian dialects are not dialect at all; they're languages, and this thing has been discussed for forever now, because there are many requirements that distinguish what a language is from what a dialect should be.
Yes.
And Italian dialects basically all fall into the language category, not the dialect category. So
Yes.
the problem becomes, yes, it's a matter of accent. Like you just gave me the example of the South African accent or pronunciation, but it's also a matter of completely different vocabulary. For example, if I write down the word for chair in Italian, chair is sedia, sedia.
Yes.
And in my dialect, it's carega,
Yes.
carega. So we have multiple issues that kind of prevent in Italian dialects from being mutually understandable.
Yes. It's a complex issue.
Mm, yeah, it is. It really is. It's, as you said, it's accent. It's also vocabulary. It's grammar sometimes, because, for example, in Venetian, when you want to say that you are currently doing something, you're in the act of doing something,
Yes.
you use a structure that is very similar to the English structure. So you use a gerund. I am eating becomes io, which is implied because we don't have you don't need to use subjects. Io sto mangiando. So the NDO structure, sto mangiando, is very similar to the concept of the ing structure in English.
Yes.
But if we go to my dialect, to Venetian, you get son rio mangiar, which means I am behind to eat.
Oh,
So
okay.
the grammar structure changes completely. So yes, we have many different types of like difficulties of things that get in the way when we want to communicate in our dialects in
Yes.
Italy.
All right. Well, this has been a fascinating chat. Uh,
For
we,
me too,
we
it was really fun. Thank you.
yes, and we got to talk about Italian and dialect and how language teaching connects with linguistics and one thing I do with my pages is I try to share the fun of language and how you can have fun with it and you can learn something at the same time.
Fun for me at least. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you so much for the time. And as you were saying, I do teach languages. I teach Italian and Japanese. I guess if any of you guys want to take a trial lesson with me, I'll let Steve introduce me from that point of view, I guess.
All right.
And
What
it
what
was a
what
pleasure.
well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.